All right, welcome back to Breakfast Television. Well, it is a sport in Montreal, talking about traffic, how to deal with it, how to live with it, and we've assembled an all-star panel as we brace for a fall of a lot of work and a lot of headaches. Let's meet our panel. Marvin Rotrand, City Councillor for Snowden, also former Vice Chair of the SDM. Marvin, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Elias.
Carolyn Arnouk is the founder of OPA Technologies, a company trying to find solutions to our traffic problems and the communication issues with businesses and government. Thank you for joining us, Carolyn. Jason Prince, urban planner at Concordia. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
We are very happy that you're here. And Rick Leckner from Maison Brisson Communications, and of course a traffic expert. You know his voice in this city. So let's talk traffic. Guys, I'm going to be honest with you. This week, my car was in the shop. And I said, I have got my Car2Go membership. I've got, a Communauto as well. But I said, you know what, let me take the bus. Let me take the metro. I'm doing this panel this week. Let's go and do it. So I want to start off with public transit, because they always say, you know what the solution is? Just use public transit during this time. But then, we just stay with our old habits. My question for you, panel, is public transit in the city ready for an increase in users? Marvin, I'll start with you, since you know this dossier.
I actually think the transit situation is good in Montreal compared to a lot of places. First of all, there's been major construction for years, and it's going to continue for years. And not everything is negative. The Ministry of Transport pumped in $10 million a few years ago on an annual basis for 4 new express bus lines from the West Island to the metro, either downtown at Lionel Groux or at Côte-Vertu. As well, this year, there's been major funding to help deal with the congestion. I've seen more service on the Green Line to Angrignon and more bus service coming from places like La Salle and Lachine. But overall, I think if there's a failing, it's a political failing. And that failing is we haven't supported strongly enough the extension of the Blue Line towards the east end of Montreal. There are 200,000 people who live out there, who consume transport, don't have easy access to the metro, and we haven't done anything for them in 20 years.
Marvin, let's bring in the rest of the panel here. So what do you say on that front?
Well, look, we don't have enough infrastructure for mass transit in Montreal. I mean, looking down the road, we should be thinking about major increases. If you look at the population density, I agree entirely with Marvin. The Blue Line and that area of the city of Montreal is where our population density is. We need more mass transit. We need axes north-south that connect. We need a loop on that side, and we need many more buses. We need to double the number of buses in that area to bring people down to the center rapidly, and they need to be on dedicated bus lanes, grade separated. That's a piece of concrete that separates, so we can't have any cheaters.
Carolyn, when businesses speak to you, they say, hey, we want public transit, or are they like, no, just parking, please more parking? What do they say to you?
I think no matter how much we increase the public transit, or we double it or we triple it, there's a bigger problem than that. Because even if we increase, if there are obstructions to the road, and we need to figure out the obstruction and the coordination of that obstruction before implementing and increasing more and more.
Rick, Carolyn's got a point. Those buses take those same roads the drivers are on.
To a degree, yes, because there are reserved bus lanes that are available now, more of them. I would say this. Number one, the priority clearly from the governments, municipal, provincial, and federal, is public transit. The money, almost $10 billion that's being spent on Champlain Bridge, Turcotte, and the Bonaventure almost finished, was for that construction, but it's not adding a heck of a lot of new capacity. The real money is going into public transit, okay, period. Are we ready for it? To an extent, yes. I think there's been a lack of vision. We knew to a degree that these projects were coming, and I think that things like Le Train de l'Ouest, the extension of Cavendish should have been, and the extension of the metro to the east end should have been done a long time ago. We spent, I'm sure, well over $200 million in studies, and we are where we are, and now we're stuck with it for the next 3 years.
I'm going to agree with Rick. Look, there are positives. For example, we have new train cars in the metro. Azure adds capacity, is a more comfortable, more reliable ride.
I took my first Azure this week, and I'm telling you, first off, you're getting this tremendous airflow, so it's finally a decent, you feel decent, you're sweltering in the heat. And you know what, there is more room.
I take that to mean you bought an Opus card, and I congratulate you. But, having said that, that's a positive, and so is the fact that money has been approved by council for things like the new Bellechasse bus center. It's going to add capacity for the new and growing fleet of the STM. But in reality, it's the major infrastructure we should have invested in years ago, where we still haven't invested. And by the way, Rick, you're absolutely right. The federal government's pumping tons of money into public transit.
I have time for one brief comment. Yeah.
So every 5 years we take a snapshot of movement in the region of Montreal. The last time we took a snapshot, we lost, the public transit lost traction against the automobile. This is not good. We went and we've taken a step back, and we need to turn that around. We need strong leadership at the STM and from the City of Montreal, and they're not doing a good job.
Okay, we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about solutions. Hold the thought, Rick. We will come back to you. A short pause. We're going to have a 90-second need to know and more on this very important issue. Stay with us on BT. We are back on the panel. Bixi users, walkers, Metro users, even if you're driving your beautiful car, tune in with us right now because we are talking about our traffic woes. Rick, before we went to commercial, you had a point you wanted to bring up about, just who needs to sort of step in here.
Let me say this, that almost 17 years after I gave up helicopter, whenever I go to a meeting or a function, people say, where's your helicopter and what are you doing about the traffic? And the question is, what are you doing about the traffic? Because we can bitch about this, and we do, but I think as individuals we have a role to play as well. We're all in love with our cars, myself included. We have been for years, as long as I did do the helicopter. Single occupant cars were the norm, and I don't think that's changed very much. And the reality is, you need to change. You need to do something because it is not going to get any better over these next 2-3 years. So we as individuals have to be part of the solution.
Okay, let's talk about the solution. Caroline, I just want to bring you in here to talk about communication, because I hear this often, that there is not enough communication between city officials, citizens, city officials, business. As you see it, where do we stand there?
So, and this is where we can help as a new company. And that's why we came up with a solution, OPA software. It enables the communication, first of all, between the 19 boroughs, the, 5 to 10 departments at the city. So if we start by them communicating better data and managing and coordinating and planning better all the road obstruction, then we can also communicate all the detours to the citizens so they know what route to take.
Does someone have an answer to this question? I would love an answer to this question. When I drive, I take Saint Jacques in, and it is construction site after construction site after construction site. Nobody's working on any of them. Why does that happen? Why do you see construction sites where nothing's happening for so long?
Why don't we have an open data project where from a construction site, it doesn't matter which one, from the very beginning, all the citizens can watch in real time what's happening so that at any moment, at every day, the White Hat has to do a report on what happened that day so we can see where the problem is. I'd love to see, please, Marvin, as a politician, can you please try a pilot project?
I actually have. Some of my motions have been adopted at City Council in terms of smart city. And guess what?
We would learn
Nothing
so
happened.
much.
Years ago, I tried to change parking in Montreal by bringing in variable parking rates to control traffic flow. That was adopted unanimously at Council. 2 or 3 years later, nada. All right?
Do we not do a good enough job looking at other cities, looking at other parts of the world, seeing what works there and adopting it?
Do we all remember the Japanese example where we had a collapsed infrastructure and we had a time-lapse photography? They fixed the problem inside of 7 days. I mean, they also run it would take us 2 years to do that.
They also run their Japan Rail East entire network a 2-second delay annually. It's incredible. Look, you said something before that I think was important, that there has, despite all the investment and effort to boost transit, been a loss in modal share. But however, you've got to look at it regionally, because on the island of Montreal, close to the center core, transit is actually doing very, very well.
Sure.
It's more regional, and what happens is we're losing billions of dollars in productivity because of congestion, but often it comes from the peripheries. And part of the real problem is not being addressed is new transit lines that will build density in areas off island without necessarily fostering urban sprawl and give people a real choice rather than their automobile. And we haven't really done that very well. And I do agree, in terms of smart city, we aren't very smart.
We desperately need a traffic sheriff.
Okay.
I know the mayor.
Wait,
we tried
did
that.
we not try that?
We tried that.
What happened there?
What happened, I don't think has yet been publicly disclosed. Let's just say it didn't work.
Yeah.
Let's just say that the individual involved, Pierre Lacasse, was not given the powers that I think he needs to be able. The city has an inspector general, Marvin, and I think we need an inspector general in traffic who will have the power, the authority, the guts to say this is what you need to do, and we'll oversee things. We can't. I just want to finish
has to be able to make heads roll. Right.
czar has to be able to work with a team, but yes, make decisions and make heads roll and make it happen. And that's not happening. There's stuff that happens on a regular basis every day, zillions of times a day within all the boroughs that contributes to the overall problem. And these are the small things that accumulate and can be regulated.
Yeah.
And we need urban acupuncture. You see, a sheriff could go in and fix this specific problem right now with a permanent solution, and it would increase the flow. We need a sheriff for sure. But let me just paint a picture here. We got 3 million in the greater Montreal region, 2 million on the periphery, 1 million.
4 million.
Okay, I'm playing with rough numbers here, but 2 million on the outside who want to come in to the center. And 1 million in the middle.
Yeah.
The million in the middle use mass transit very well. It's those people on the outside. We need to fix the periphery.
Do
You're
we
right.
need to make it, from what I hear you guys say, do we need to make it more difficult for people to park in the center of Montreal, whether it's, you pay a toll when you come into the city center or
That's a
increase
solution.
parking rates?
Well, you talk about looking outside Quebec and you look at Europe and you see congestion taxes and all kinds of variable rates. And I think these are things that should have been considered long ago, but it's all political.
But I think the major here, it's a lack of an overview of what's happening. And we cannot say we're going to block the city, the island, and we don't want to let anyone come in. And because it's like there are a lot of events in Montreal, and we want to welcome these events, we want to go to these events. So we cannot just say this is the solution. I think we have to test. And talking about the
Is there a
smart
plan?
city, I think there's a lack of investment in the technology,
Yeah.
exactly. So we need to test our solutions and to adjust this solution, like the OPA software or any other software out there, any other solutions, and to match this solution to the specific needs of the city. And
I got time for one more comment?
It's also taking ownership. And I don't think the powers that be do that enough, and I don't think the contractors are forced to take ownership. When you have Côte de Neige under construction for 2 years, and the only lane that's open looks like a third world trail, that's unacceptable. And somebody needs to say, fix this today, make that one lane that's open at least drivable, and why is this taking so long?
Else. Okay, stick with us. We are not stopping yet. We still have more to come talking about the solutions to Montreal's traffic woes.
They're doing construction in front of my house and in the back of my house. But what takes place in the back of my house is 24 hours because the Minister of Transport wants to get the construction over and done with as quickly as possible, which is understandable, but they do construction 24 hours a day behind my house, so I can't sleep. Why am I penalized for all their mistakes?
Well, a valid story there. Life near the Turcotte in Montreal as that construction continues to happen. Marvin, I want to go back to you right away because you said you want to talk about your smartphone. I know I go to Boston, they have an app. You open it up, you can tap on this, it pops up a pin. It says, what's your problem? Gets reported to the city. What do we need to do here?
Well, this is actually the future of a lot of the solutions. First of all, in terms of public transit, iBus is coming on stream. So
About time.
riders are going to be able to get real-time information. Hey, my bus is like a minute and a half down the road. Better information helps better trip planning. But the city's got to do more about that for parking as well. The car still will have a role in mobility in the future. Even though we want to move more and more to sustainable mobility, cars are not going to disappear. So you need a better way to control them. One of the things, and it's a legitimate question, is are our parking rates too low in Montreal? Downtown Vancouver, $6 an hour to park. Montreal, the maximum is $3. Now, when I brought up this variable parking rate, there are some areas where parking rates are too high for the demand. But in most other areas, they're too low for the demand. And cars park there all day. There's no rotation. And cars go around the block looking for a place to park.
Okay,
There's nowhere to park.
What do you say to a business owner who's like, it's hard enough to get someone to come into town and to spend their money? What do you say to
Business owners benefit when cars come, people shop, and then they move on. It maximizes business. When you have too low rates, you have people, including employees, parking for $2 an hour on certain streets. It's cheaper to do that than go to a lot where they charge you $15 for the first hour. So, that's got to be looked at by the city. And using your smartphone to give information about available spots and available parking, we're not doing enough of it. It's embryonic in Montreal.
We talked about it in the last election 4 years ago, and very little has materialized since then.
Do you think it's going to be an election? Like, how much of an election issue will this be?
It should be. It should be. We can get into a whole debate about who the candidates are, but I think still with technology, we're told to use Mobility Montréal and Québec 5, which as apps are insufficient
Hard
and
to
don't work
navigate.
well, hard to navigate. I mean, you look at this thing, you literally can't see the forest for the trees. I looked before I came here this morning. In less than a week, they're closing that ramp from 50 north to 20 west, which is going to cause mayhem. There's not a word of it anywhere on mobility. I mean, people should be thinking, planning, but it's not there. And I heard one more point in public transit. We desperately need this electric crane that's coming. The
LRT. The light
LRT.
rail, yeah.
And I heard on the news this morning, Michael Sabia is still pleading with the government to get the bill passed. This should have been done. We're losing time. If this is going to be ready for 2020, I mean, I'll eat your hat.
I don't agree. I think that LRT is actually a real estate development project. It's not a transport project. It doesn't really solve a whole bunch of problems. So that's another story.
But if you live in Griffintown and the Peel Basin, you're happy with it.
Here's the thing. The government has carrots and they have sticks. And you can't put the sticks in price parking, price gas, price kilometers traveled for cars, until you've got the solution in. You've got to have solution first. You've got to have better mass transit. You've got to have the option for them. And then you bring out the sticks and you can beat them over. That's how it should work. Unfortunately, we usually put the cart before the horse.
Rick mentioned Mobilité Montréal and 5 so I have worked with Mobilité Montréal and 5 on a pilot project using the software, and we saw the problem with the public transit and that's why we launched a new module to help the public transit to better manage also their detours, because buses have to do the detours too. So I think there's a very important need to have a real overview and a better communication with everybody working on all the construction sites. Yes.
The open data movement did a pilot project very early on. They took Google traffic, where you optimize your trip, and they crossed it with construction data from the City of Montreal, and they gave the optimized detour. It was the best example of how open data can really transform the city.
So talking about the open data, but before you open the data to the public, you need to have the good data.
Yeah.
And there's a problem with that. It's absolutely crucial. We need the good data.
So it's from the 15
and
agencies.
it's about the communication,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And does government need to work more with private companies? I mean, if you have an iPhone and you download the Transit app by a Montreal developer,
right, I love that
it's
one.
amazing. You download the STM's app, it's meh, right? It's not very good. So shouldn't the STM, should they be working more with private companies who got better solutions already in place?
I'm not opposed to that, and the developers of iBus are a private firm actually that won the tender, and they're very, very good, and they do some of the best, transit information right across cities across the world. Look, for me, the solution is choosing the right priorities for major projects. You can argue about the REM or not, and I do have a lot of questions about it, but for me, it's clear. What the heck does it take 15 years to build a bus rapid transit way on P9 when everywhere else it's 4 years?
This is an international embarrassment.
More than a dream now that in the year 2025, it makes so much sense. Why aren't we prioritizing the lines that are going to build ridership and intermodality and have a discernible impact on transit?
Panelists,
lack of vision, lack of leadership.
We are out of time, but I will say this. One thing that came out of this, the money is there. The money's being spent. It's not a money issue. The common sense needs to get an upgrade. We'll be back on BT with more Entertainment City is ahead.